My daughter smashed my phone and called me crazy. I disappeared the next day. I never thought I'd see the day my daughter would look at me like I was insane, until she ripped my phone out of my hands and smashed it on the floor. I never thought I'd be afraid of my own child. But that afternoon, something snapped. It started like any other Sunday. The coffee was lukewarm, the living room smelled faintly of lavender, and I was scrolling through my phone, checking my emails, minding my business. Then Lily, my 28-year-old daughter, stormed in. Her eyes were wild, filled with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not even disappointment. It was disgust. "Give it to me," she snapped, pointing at my phone. "Lily, what are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You need to stop. You need help, Mom. You're sick and you don't even know it." Before I could even respond, she lunged forward, snatched the phone from my hands, and with one swift, deliberate move, slammed it onto the floor. "You don't need this anymore," she hissed. "You're not in control." The room went silent. I stared at the shattered screen. My hands trembled with what had just broken between us. My name is Susan Taylor. I'm 58, I live in Ohio. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't just losing control, I was being erased. They say hindsight is 20/20. Looking back now, the signs were all there. But when you're living with someone who wears the perfect mask, it's easy to think you're the one going crazy. David Taylor was the man every woman envied me for. A sharp-suited financial advisor with a Rolex smile and charm that could melt concrete. We met in our 30s when I was teaching art history at a community college, and he was climbing the ranks at a boutique investment firm in Cleveland. He was attentive, always remembered our anniversaries, made breakfast every Sunday. My friends swooned. My sister Joanne said he was a unicorn. But unicorns don't empty your soul one lie at a time. The first red flag didn't look red at all. It was beige, harmless. David started managing our finances, said it was his world, and I didn't need to worry. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was a numbers guy. I was an artist. It made sense. Then one afternoon I was trying to balance our checkbook just out of curiosity, and I noticed a transaction. $50,000 gone. Just vanished. I asked him, "Oh, sweetheart, it's an investment. Short-term bond. I'll explain later." He didn't, but the money came back. Or at least a similar number showed up weeks later. I convinced myself it was fine. I was just overthinking. He was the expert. Then came the second one. $75,000. This time, when I asked, he laughed. "You're obsessing, Susan. This is why I don't talk money with you. It stresses you out." I remember the way he said it, like I was a child tugging on an adult's sleeve. I dropped it. Again. But things got worse. Subtle, but sharp. David started criticizing my memory. I'd forget where I left my keys, and he'd sigh. "Maybe write it down next time, hun. You've been a little forgetful lately." At first, I laughed it off. Then it became a pattern. "Did you take your pills today? You told me that already. Are you sure you're not confusing things again?" It felt like living in a house where the lights kept flickering. But when you told someone, they insisted it was just your imagination. And then, the therapist. He said he'd found someone for me to talk to. A specialist in age-related cognitive anxiety. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Crane. We had 3 Zoom sessions. She seemed nice, sympathetic, always said I was brave for seeking help. But something felt off. She never asked for my insurance. No paperwork, no medical history. Just vague advice and an eerie calmness. Months later, I found out Dr. Eleanor Crane didn't exist. There was no license, no practice, nothing. She was a name David made up, probably a friend or an actor he paid to help him build a case. Because you see, David wasn't just gaslighting me. He was setting the stage to declare me legally incompetent. He'd already started whispering things to Lily, our daughter, our beautiful, stubborn, headstrong Lily. "She's not well," he told her. "Your mom's slipping. I think she's hiding things. It's getting dangerous." And Lily believed him. Why wouldn't she? David was the responsible one. I was the flustered, forgetful mom. The one who called her 3 times in a row asking if she left her charger. The one who lost her purse in the freezer once. Yes, the freezer. It sounds funny now. Back then, every little mishap became ammunition. David painted a picture of a woman spiraling into madness. And Lily, already working long hours, stressed and distant, couldn't see what I was trying to say. The worst part, I started doubting myself too. I remember one night, I looked in the mirror and whispered, "Am I really losing it?" That was the night I found the burner phone. David had left his briefcase open. There inside was a second phone. New, clean, no messages, no fingerprints. But it had a Costa Rica SIM card inside. I didn't say anything. I just noted it, memorized the number. Then I started searching the house when he was away. I found shredded documents in the trash, bank envelopes from offshore accounts, receipts for expensive jewelry I never received, and the final straw, hidden in the attic behind an old box of Christmas lights, was a leather-bound notebook. David's handwriting, dozens of pages, transaction notes, names I didn't recognize, and a single phrase written at the top of one page: Phase 2, finalize policy, remove obstacle. I was the obstacle. That's when I stopped being afraid of seeming crazy and started being afraid for my life. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. After finding David's leather notebook with its cold, calculated mention of Phase 2, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark heart, pounding like a war drum. That was the moment I knew I couldn't confront him. I couldn't scream. I couldn't ask why. I had to disappear. But first, I needed proof. Something real. Something no one could dismiss as paranoia. So I started small. I bought a notebook, plain spiral-bound with blue lines, and a cheap plastic cover. I kept it in a hollowed-out art book on the top shelf of my studio. That became my log. Every date, every strange withdrawal, every conversation that felt off. I copied details from David's files when he wasn't home. Names, dollar amounts, routing numbers. Then I went to the bank. Not the big branch where we did our family banking, but a smaller one across town where no one knew me. I asked to open a safe deposit box under my maiden name, paid in cash, hid my notebook there. I also bought a second phone, cash only, prepaid. I hid it in a pouch under the lining of my old sewing kit, something David hadn't touched in years. That phone was my lifeline. I needed help, but I couldn't trust anyone in David's world. So I reached out to someone from mine. Her name was R. Marsh. At least that's what her username said in the online forum for financial abuse survivors. We'd messaged back and forth for weeks after I posted anonymously about a friend in danger. I finally texted her from the burner phone. "Me. It's worse than I thought. I need help leaving. Safely. R. Marsh. You're not alone. I've got someone who can help. She's discreet. Do you have a safe number?" The next day, I got a call from a woman named Meredith Walker. Soft voice, firm words. She told me she was a private investigator specializing in domestic coercion and financial fraud. I didn't ask who paid her. I just listened as she said, "Your sister Joanne reached out weeks ago. She received a letter from someone describing your situation. We believed it might be you. Joanne." God, Joanne. We hadn't spoken in months. David had told me she was toxic, that she always envied our family. I stopped calling her after 1, 2 months. She never stopped worrying. That letter, it was from Nancy Moore, someone I barely knew at the time. Nancy, it turns out, was the wife of one of David's top clients. She had overheard a private call David made while drunk at a business retreat. He mentioned Susan being out of the picture soon. Nancy knew something was wrong. She'd followed her gut, found Joanne's address in my old Rolodex when she visited our home once for dinner, and she mailed her a warning. Thanks to Nancy's letter, Joanne hired Meredith, and now Meredith was my only way out. We arranged to meet at a botanical garden just outside Cleveland. Neutral, public, quiet. I wore a hat, oversized sunglasses, and layered 2 coats in case I needed to ditch one. I felt like a criminal in my own skin. Meredith was sharp, mid-40s, confident. She wore a plain gray blazer and had eyes that missed nothing. She slid a small envelope across the bench. Inside a flash drive, a list of secure shelters and a portable recording device, no bigger than a lipstick tube. "You need a trail of evidence," she said, "and a backup plan. This is about safety, not revenge." I nodded, too choked up to speak. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own home. I started sleeping in the guest room, claiming David's snoring kept me up. Really, I needed distance. I set up a system the burner phone would only be used at night outside when I pretended to walk the dog. Every call was made from a different location. Every note I took had a duplicate hidden in the bank. I photographed the notebook, recorded David's late-night calls, captured screenshots of his emails from the Costa Rica phone when he left it unlocked. He was planning everything. A guardianship hearing, false affidavits, a full transfer of my trust fund into an account under David T. Taylor Holdings, all under the guise of protecting a mentally declining spouse. Every time I got a new piece of evidence, I uploaded it to the secure drive Meredith gave me. But time was running out. David had started asking questions. "Why are you so quiet lately? You missed your meds again. Are you feeling okay? Should we call Dr. Crane?" That name, Dr. Crane. It made my stomach turn. I played dumb. Then one afternoon, Lily visited. She looked worried, sat me down like I was a patient, said Dad's concerned. "He thinks you're slipping." I looked into her eyes. My daughter. The baby I carried for 9 months. The girl who used to draw unicorns on my office walls. She was looking at me like I was broken. "I'm fine," I said softly. She didn't believe me. That night, I knew. It had to happen soon. If I waited too long, I'd end up somewhere I couldn't get out of. Institutionalized. Declared unfit. Forgotten. I texted Meredith, "I'm ready." "What's next?" Her reply came in seconds. "We set the trap." I always thought I'd face this nightmare alone. But I was wrong. In a world that tried to erase me, it was 3 women, 3 very different women, who chose to stand by me when I had nothing left. Meredith Walker was the general, quiet, calculated, and 2 steps ahead of every move David made. She wasn't flashy, didn't play to the drama, but behind that calm demeanor was a fire that could melt steel. She set up a secure cloud account where I could upload all my evidence. She taught me how to sweep my phone for spyware. She gave me phrases to use in casual conversation that, when repeated in different contexts, would expose if David was monitoring my calls. And most importantly, She never questioned my story. There's a pattern with men like David, she said one night. They don't destroy you in one blow. They chip away until you start apologizing for being hit. Then, there was Joanne, my sister. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. David made sure of that. Every time I tried to reconnect, he reminded me how toxic she was, how judgmental. I believed him. I let the silence grow between us like a vine strangling our history. But when Joanne got Nancy's letter, typed unsigned, sealed in a plain white envelope, she didn't hesitate. She flew from Arizona to Ohio without telling me. She hired Meredith. She followed her gut, not the gossip. When we finally saw each other again in the back booth of a diner off I-71, we didn't cry. We didn't apologize. We just held hands and started planning. I knew he was bad, she said. I just didn't know he was this good at hiding it. Nancy Moore was the wild card. She was everything David couldn't control, rich, intuitive, and married to his biggest client. She and I had spoken maybe 3 times in passing holiday parties, charity galas, superficial stuff. I always thought she was a bit snobbish, to be honest. But it turned out Nancy had a spine made of iron. She'd heard the phone call that started it all. David had been drinking careless, talking to someone about the asset being moved. She won't be around much longer, he'd said. I've got it covered. The words chilled her. She told me weeks later. It didn't sound like business. It sounded like a hit. Nancy began watching him. Quietly. She had resources, private drivers, access to social circles I never even knew existed. She noticed patterns, late-night meetings, a woman named Vanessa Diaz flight itineraries to Costa Rica, that David never mentioned to me sudden closures of mutual fund accounts. She followed him once from a conference in Chicago to a condo in Key Biscayne. Vanessa answered the door in lingerie. Nancy didn't confront him. She didn't tell her husband. She documented everything and sent it to Joanne. And now she was in the fight with us. The 3 of them worked like a team forged in war. Meredith handled the surveillance. She placed a GPS tracker on David's second car and a hidden camera in the basement office he thought I never entered. Joanne became my alibi and my lifeline. She opened a P.O. box in her town under my maiden name, where we rerouted sensitive mail. She paid for a second storage unit, where I began slowly moving out my valuables, jewelry photo albums, heirlooms piece by piece, inside donation boxes, under the pretense of spring cleaning. Nancy. She was the mole. She planted doubts in David's mind, invited him to events, subtly asked questions like, "Is Susan feeling better? And I hear she's been acting out, poor thing." She mirrored his manipulation, made him feel in control, and used that illusion to dig deeper. Through Nancy, we got access to something we never expected: David's Costa Rica property deed. It wasn't in his name. It was under V. Diaz Holdings, a shell company registered through a Panamanian firm. But the paper trail led right back to him, and it wasn't just a vacation home. It was listed as a medical recovery retreat. Meredith's eyes narrowed when she saw that. "This is a kill plan," she said. "He takes you there under the guise of mental treatment. You have an accident. He flies home with a death certificate and cashes out." That wasn't the worst of it. Joanne found a name hidden in a set of insurance documents that David had kept at the back of a locked file cabinet. Guardian proxy, L. Taylor. Lily. He was preparing to have our daughter legally take over my medical decisions. He was turning her into his weapon. I couldn't breathe when I saw it. My hands shook. My heart broke in 1,000 directions. Because Lily wasn't evil. She was manipulated. She believed what David told her, that I was spiraling paranoid, a danger to myself. She didn't want to take over my life. She wanted to save it. But David didn't want a guardian. He wanted a pawn. The three women, Meredith, Joanne, and Nancy, looked at me across a table covered in files, screenshots, voice recordings, and bank statements. "This ends soon," Meredith said, "but only when we control the story." "Are you ready?" Joanne asked. I nodded. I was born ready. "No," Nancy said, sipping her coffee. "You were made ready." It had to look real, like I'd finally broken, like I was scared, desperate, crawling back to the man who'd spent years building my cage. "Call him," Meredith said. "He has to believe he's won." So I did. My voice trembled as I said, "David, I need to talk. Alone. I think I need help." There was silence on the other end of the line, then the softest sigh, satisfaction. He took the bait. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's meet. Just you and me." We agreed on the old park where we used to take Lily for walks as a baby. 3:00 p.m. The sun would still be out. Public but quiet. Enough cover for what I needed. What he didn't know was that Meredith had set up hidden mics in my coat. A small camera tucked in my necklace. And Nancy. She had arranged for Lily to happen to be nearby, under the guise of returning a borrowed book to her father. The plan was simple bait. Confess. Expose. Flip. I sat on the bench 15 minutes early, just to steady my breath. The notebook was in my bag. The flash drive with the recordings was in my hand, tucked into a tissue. David arrived in a pressed blazer, and that same smug look he always wore when he thought he was about to get what he wanted. "Susan," he said, sitting beside me, like we were old lovers. "I'm glad you called. I've been so worried." I stared straight ahead. "You were right," I whispered. "I've been confused, scared. I found some things I shouldn't have." His face twitched. Just a fraction. But I saw it. "What things?" he asked, voice smooth. "Bank transfers. Emails. The burner phone. Vanessa." Still looking ahead, I slipped the flash drive into his hand. "I don't want to fight," I said. "Just explain it to me. I want to understand." He laughed quietly. "You always did overthink things, Susan." That was when he said it. The line we needed. The line that would burn it all down. "Lily will believe whatever I tell her," he said. "She trusts me. You've been slipping for years." He turned toward me, then condescending smile widening. "You won't win." That's when I spoke clearly. No more tremble in my voice. "She already has." Right on cue, Lily stepped out from behind the trees. Her face was pale lips, pressed tight fists clenched at her sides. "Dad," she said. David froze. "Lily, this isn't he started," but she held up her phone. She'd heard everything, every word. Meredith had patched the mic directly to her earbud. "You lied to me," she said, her voice cracking. "All this time you lied to me." David stood suddenly flustered. "You don't understand, baby. Your mother, she's been manipulating." "No," Lily snapped. "You've been manipulating me, gaslighting her, making me think she was crazy." "What kind of father does that?" He tried to reach for her. She stepped back. "Don't," she said. "Don't touch me." Then came the moment I'd waited years for. I stood turned toward him and said, "You built a story so perfect you forgot real people don't follow scripts." I stood my breath steady, now my spine taller than it had felt in years. David's eyes darted between me and Lily, like a trapped animal searching for a hole in the fence. "You built a story so perfect," I said, my voice clear, firm. "You forgot that real people don't follow scripts. Lily stepped closer, tears streaming down her cheeks now, not from sadness but fury. All those times, she said, voice trembling, "You made me think Mom was paranoid. You said she needed help, that she was dangerous. But it was you." David's composure cracked. "This is absurd," he snapped. "She's twisted everything. I was protecting this family." "No, David," I said. "You were protecting your secret, your girlfriend, your offshore accounts, your little fantasy escape plan." His face flushed deep red. He opened his mouth to argue, but then Meredith appeared from the tree line. Calm, confident, with a badge in her hand, not a police badge, but her official license as a state-licensed investigator. "I've been recording since you arrived," she said coolly. "And by the way, you just confessed to psychological abuse and financial manipulation. On tape, with your daughter as witness." He backed up a step. "You set me up," he growled. "No," he said softly. I finally stood up. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed. It wasn't joy. It was the bitter, ugly laugh of a man who'd lost the upper hand. "You think any of this will matter," he sneered. "You're still nothing, Susan. You always were. No court will believe this circus act. Then let the police decide," came a new voice. Detective James Fowler stepped out from behind a stone monument, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Nancy had quietly tipped him off with the full dossier Meredith compiled. The detective had been tailing David for days, collecting his own evidence. David's face drained of color. "David Taylor Fowler announced you're under arrest for fraud falsifying medical records, financial coercion, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." David's mouth opened, then closed. For once in his life, he had nothing left to say. As they cuffed him, I looked at Lily. She was staring at the man who raised her like he was a stranger, and maybe now he finally was. The sirens weren't blaring. No guns were drawn. There was no screaming. Just the quiet, unmistakable sound of handcuffs clicking shut behind the man who'd spent years trying to lock me inside his lies. David Taylor, once the darling of Ohio's financial elite, stood frozen in the middle of the park, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and Detective James Fowler. His tailored blazer was wrinkled now, his hair usually combed with military precision, ruffled by the wind. I watched his chest rise and fall sharp and shallow. The man who always controlled the room was finally in a place where he couldn't talk his way out. "Mr. Taylor," Detective Fowler said, "in an even tone, we've reviewed extensive evidence of embezzlement, document falsification, coercive control, and attempted insurance fraud. We'll discuss it all downtown." David started to speak, but Fowler raised a hand. "Save it for your attorney." The cuffs tightened and they walked him toward the patrol car. Lily didn't speak. She stood beside me, arms wrapped around herself, her jaw clenched, her eyes hollow. "He lied to me for years," she whispered. "I know," I said, but not anymore. As they drove away, the silence between us grew thick. Not with guilt, but with grief for the time lost. Nancy joined us, her heels crunching on the gravel. "That went smoother than I expected," she said, glancing back at the officers. "But it's far from over." She was right. Later that night, I was called to the precinct to give a full statement. Meredith was already there uploading digital files to the detective's laptop. Financial records, audio recordings. The flash drive I'd handed David, the same one he'd tried to slip into his coat before the officers arrived, had been recovered. It held everything: his plans, his voice, his words about Lily. But the biggest twist came 2 days later. Vanessa Diaz called the station. She wanted to cooperate. According to Detective Fowler, Vanessa walked into the Costa Rican consulate in D.C. and asked to speak with someone in international financial crimes. She had documents, emails, invoices, even a video of David coaching her on what to say if anyone ever asked questions. She turned it all over in exchange for immunity. Her statement was explosive. David had been grooming her to act as the medical assistant for my overseas treatment. He told her I had early onset dementia that was violent and unpredictable. He planned to fly me to the Costa Rica property stage, a medical emergency. And then, well, his wording was vague, but the insurance paperwork wasn't. In the folder, Vanessa provided there was a life insurance policy, $2.5 million with my name as the insured, and a special circumstance clause, activated in case of death outside U.S. jurisdiction. The beneficiary, David Taylor. Back in Ohio, Fowler's team searched the basement again. Behind the false wall David had installed in his private office, they found a fireproof safe. Inside passports, burner phones, forged documents, and a black leather-bound notebook. My hands shook when I opened it. There it was. Phase 2, written in clean capital letters. Page after page detailed his intentions. Dates, contacts, payment schedules to shell companies. Even a contingency list in case Lily became emotional. He had mapped out my death like a business plan. And I had once shared a bed with this man. The detectives took everything into evidence. Meredith requested we photograph the contents before handing them over. In case anything goes missing, she said. Lily and I sat on the porch of my sister's house that night. It was quiet. The crickets chirped. The world kept spinning. I keep thinking she said, "What if I hadn't shown up that day? What if you hadn't said anything? You would have figured it out eventually," I said gently. She shook her head. "I let him poison me against you. I believed him. I didn't even question it." "You were raised to trust him," I replied. "That's not your fault." But she looked at me with eyes full of shame. He used me as part of the plan, and I walked right into it. There's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed. It festers in silence. But that night, we started to clean the wound. Over the following weeks, the investigation grew. Vanessa's cooperation led to additional charges, international fraud conspiracy, and attempted homicide by financial manipulation. Fowler said it was one of the most sophisticated domestic abuse cases he'd ever seen because it left no bruises. David's bail was denied. His assets were frozen. The firm he worked for publicly denounced him, and multiple clients filed civil suits. The media picked it up. Respected advisor caught in web of lies. The Taylor trap. My name wasn't mentioned at first, just as his wife, but when a local reporter called and asked for a statement, I agreed. I wanted women to know manipulation doesn't always come with fists. Sometimes it comes dressed in a suit, with a smile, and a quiet voice that makes you doubt your own sanity. The week after finding David's notebook passed like a dream wrapped in a nightmare. Every page felt like a post-mortem of our marriage, written by a man who had never truly loved me, only leveraged me. But that book, it didn't just document his lies. It gave me closure. Detective Fowler told me, "That's not a notebook. That's a confession." It was entered into evidence, but I asked for copies. I wanted to know every word, to see the exact moment he decided to erase me from his life. And ironically, in trying to write me out of his future, David had carved himself a prison cell. As the case grew, more people came forward. Former clients who had suspicions, but were too embarrassed to speak up. A former assistant who claimed she'd been asked to sign off on documents without reading them. Even a family friend admitted David once joked at a barbecue. If Susan ever goes missing, tell them she ran off to Europe. Not so funny anymore. Nancy continued feeding the press, not with sensationalism, but with facts. She gave interviews to major outlets about how powerful men manipulate from within. She framed it as a cautionary tale for other women married to wolves in wool suits. Her words gave my experience a voice, one that couldn't be dismissed. Then came the insurance companies. Turns out David had taken out multiple policies on me, not just the Costa Rica one. 3 in total. Each one structured differently, under the guise of estate planning. When investigators questioned the timing and motive, the case expanded to federal levels. David's lawyer tried everything: emotional instability, business stress, even accusing me of forging documents, but the evidence crushed them. With Vanessa's testimony and the recordings, his legal team advised a plea deal. He refused. David believed until the very last moment that he could spin the jury, that he could charm them, as he had charmed boardrooms and social clubs and country club luncheons for years. But justice doesn't wear pearls. At trial, I took the stand. I was nervous. My hands trembled. But when I looked into the jury's eyes and said he told me I was crazy while planning to have me killed, there wasn't a single blink. I walked them through the gaslighting, the phone calls, the fake doctor. I showed them the burner phone, the safe deposit log, the receipts. I read a passage from his notebook, the one labeled Susan's Decline. Talking points for Lily. When I finished, no one spoke. Even David looked shaken. Lily testified too. She stood tall, honest, braver than I'd ever seen her. My father turned me into a weapon, she told the court. He made me doubt the woman who gave me everything. Her voice cracked, but she didn't break. And in that courtroom, I saw her reclaim herself. The jury took less than 2 hours to deliver a verdict guilty, on all counts. The judge's sentence 7 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation, felt like the system finally saying, "We see you. We believe you. And we won't let him win." As the bailiff led him away, David turned back one last time, not to apologize, but to glare. And I met that look head-on, unflinching, because he no longer had power over me. That was the last time I saw him. Later that evening, after the court emptied and the cameras left, I went home to Joanne's place and sat by the window with a cup of tea. Lily sat beside me, her head on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then she whispered, "You saved us." I shook my head. "No," I said. "We saved each other." And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. The courtroom was packed, but you could have heard a pin drop. David sat in the defendant's chair, still dressed like a man who thought he was going home. Dark navy suit, gold cufflinks tie, knotted tight as ever. But he looked smaller now, not in stature, but in presence. The arrogance had drained from his face, the smile long gone. The judge read the verdict slowly, deliberately. "Mr. David Taylor, you are hereby sentenced to 7 years in state prison for fraud, falsification of medical records, embezzlement, and attempted insurance fraud. You are to pay restitution and remain under court supervision following your release." 7 years. It wasn't the lifetime sentence I wanted, but it was justice. He didn't look at me when they took him away, and I didn't need him to. The weeks after the trial moved in waves. Some days I felt like I was finally breathing. Others, I'd wake up gripping the sheets, heart pounding, thinking I was still trapped in that house under his control. But the difference now, I wasn't alone. Lily came by the morning after the sentencing. No makeup, hair in a loose bun, just real. She stood in my doorway for a long moment before saying anything. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. I motioned her in. "You were lied to," I told her. Just like I was. For a long time. She sat at the kitchen table, the same one David used to spread out his files and tell us what we could and couldn't afford. I keep replaying everything she said, eyes glossy. The way I talked to you. The way I ignored the signs. "You were protecting the parent you thought was right," I replied. "That's not a crime." She shook her head. "It still hurts." I reached across the table and took her hand. "So let it hurt," I said, "but don't let it own you." That night, she told me she had applied for a new job with the Victim Support Division at the Ohio Department of Financial Protection. "I want to help people like you," she said. "People like me, too." And just like that, something in me healed a little. The house was the next thing to go. It took 3 months to list it. Every room was a memory, a minefield. The living room where he played perfect husband. The basement where his secrets lived. Even the garden where I used to find peace now felt like a stage he'd managed. But when I signed the sale documents, I didn't feel sadness. I felt release. Joanne met me in the place. It was smaller, simpler, but filled with light. She'd already stocked the fridge and lined the bookshelves with poetry, art history, and detective novels. "It's time you live for you," she said, handing me the spare key. And I did. I applied to Ohio State's continuing education program and was accepted into the graduate program in art history, my first love. The one David had always dismissed as a cute hobby. The program coordinator said my essay was one of the most passionate they'd ever read. I didn't tell her it was written on a night I couldn't sleep, sitting in my pajamas, fueled by memory and rage. I went to class twice a week. Learned again how to think critically, to express, to analyze beauty, not survive danger. And it felt good. Then came the message. A simple email subject line, "Long time." It was from Daniel Moore, Nancy's brother-in-law. We'd met years ago briefly at a holiday fundraiser. Back then he was quiet, kind. Said he volunteered teaching pottery at a shelter. "I heard what happened," he wrote. "I know it's not my place, but if you'd ever like coffee, just to talk art or breathe air, I'd be honored." I stared at the message for 20 minutes before replying. "I think coffee would be nice." Daniel turned out to be just as I remembered, soft-spoken, thoughtful, and entirely uninterested in fixing me. We talked about Monet and Georgia O'Keeffe, about grief and healing, about the absurdity of how long it takes to find your voice when someone spent years burying it. He didn't ask about David. He asked about me. And that was new. We didn't rush. We didn't define anything, but we saw each other often. Sometimes he'd bring coffee to campus between my classes. Sometimes we'd sit in the park and sketch. One time, he surprised me with a blank canvas and said I figured you'd rather paint the next chapter than write it. I smiled. I hadn't painted in 15 years, but that afternoon I did. One morning, I found Lily sitting in my kitchen again. She'd brought donuts and her official state ID badge. "I'm heading to Columbus for orientation," she said. "But I wanted to stop by first." We talked for an hour. She told me she'd met someone, a woman named Jessica, who worked in elder fraud prevention. She glowed when she talked about her, and when she hugged me goodbye, it wasn't awkward. It was full. "I love you, Mom," she said. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I cried for a long time after she left. Not out of sadness, out of joy. Because I had my daughter back. Because I had myself back. 1 year after David's arrest, I stood at the podium of a community seminar hosted by the state's Department of Justice. The room was filled with women, some survivors, some still trapped. And I told them my story. I told them how control doesn't always look like bruises, how gaslighting isn't always shouting, it's silence, dismissal, misdirection. I told them how sometimes the people closest to you are the ones building your cage, and how sometimes the way out begins with a single sentence: "I think something's wrong." After the event, a woman came up to me, maybe in her 60s, trembling. "I thought I was crazy," she whispered, "but you described my life exactly." I took her hand. "You're not crazy," I said. "You're just not alone anymore." After that first speaking event, I received dozens of emails, some from strangers, others from women I hadn't heard from in years. A high school friend wrote, "I thought I was the only one." A neighbor confessed, "I used to envy you. Now, I just admire you." I started volunteering at a local support center every Friday, helping survivors of financial abuse organize their documents, build safety plans, and reclaim their narratives. Some of them couldn't even name what they were experiencing until I handed them my own story piece by piece. "See this," I'd say, holding up a forged document. "That's not love. That's control." I even helped establish a small fund, the Second Light Initiative, with help from Nancy and Daniel. It provided prepaid phones, legal referrals, and short-term housing for women preparing to leave toxic financial relationships. We didn't advertise it. Word spread through whispers, the same way safety does in dangerous places. One morning, I found a handwritten card in my mailbox. No return address. It read, "I listened to your story. I'm leaving tonight. Thank you for lighting the first match." I kept it in my desk drawer next to my class notes, and a photo of Lily at her new job. Speaking of Lily, she thrived. After months of training and emotional recovery, she became a licensed financial advocate for victims of domestic coercion. She ran workshops, gave presentations, even trained law enforcement officers on identifying signs that aren't physical. She told me I want to be the voice I wish I'd heard sooner. We spoke weekly, dined monthly. One night, after a particularly good Italian meal, she asked, "Do you think he ever loved us?" I didn't lie. "I think he loved control, and we made him feel powerful." She nodded, not bitter, just wiser. I'm glad we took it back. Meanwhile, Daniel and I continued to see each other, not constantly, not dramatically, just steadily. He never asked for more than I could give, but he always offered more than I thought I deserved. One weekend, he invited me to a pottery retreat. I nearly declined too messy, too out of character. But he looked at me with that quiet confidence of his and said, "Let's reshape something. Together." So I went, and I loved it. We worked clay into imperfect bowls and lopsided cups. I laughed more than I had in years. At one point, he gently placed his hand over mine as I molded a vase and said, "You don't have to be perfect for this to be beautiful." I think he meant more than pottery. The anniversary of David's sentencing came and went. No headlines, no fanfare. Just a quiet awareness in my chest that time was moving forward, and I was too. I finished my first semester of grad school with straight A's. Joanne threw me a mini party in her backyard with homemade lasagna and a bouquet of wildflowers. "You did it," she said, raising a glass. and without permission from anyone. I looked around at the life I had rebuilt. Soft, honest, free. I did, I said. And I'm not done. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky turned that soft lavender pink, I stood on my little patio with a steaming cup of tea and breathed in deeply. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't watching my back or second-guessing my thoughts. I was here, alive, whole, not because someone saved me, but because I decided I was worth saving. If you've listened this far, maybe something in Susan's story felt familiar. Wondering if you're the problem. Maybe you've heard someone you love twist your words, make you question your memory, isolate you from people who care. Maybe you're living in a story someone else is writing for you. But hear this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And it is not your fault. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And saying it out loud could be the first step to taking your life back. If you or someone you know is experiencing financial or emotional abuse, reach out. Talk to someone you trust. Find a local support network. There is help, and there is hope. Comment below if you've ever been through something like this, or if you just want to send strength to someone who has. Like this video if Susan's story moved you. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories of courage, truth, and justice. And most importantly, share this with someone who needs to hear it, because you never know. Your voice might be the light in someone else's darkness.